The desert kept its own clock, measured not by hours but by light and wind. All afternoon the sun had hammered the flats until every rock shivered with heat and the air itself seemed to ripple. Toward evening, the light softened, and the shadows grew long and blue, and that was when the coyotes began to sing far off in the gullies. It was also when the outlaws lit their fire in a dry wash and laughed too loud because some men could not hear their own fear unless they drowned it. She sat a little apart from them with her back to a boulder, wrists bound, ankles raw where the rope had rubbed. Sand dusted the torn hem of her dress, and the wind turned loose strands of her hair to dry grass around her face. She watched the sky because it was the only thing they had not stolen. The sky told her where she was in the story of this day, and it said she had almost reached the part where the light sank and a colder danger settled close. The men called her the banker's daughter, though she had not seen her father in years and had never been anything but a clerk in a quiet office. The truth did not matter to them. They wanted ransom or a trade, or simply to hurt the town that had pushed them out. Their leader was called Reno Jacks, a man with a scar like a crooked river across his cheek and a grin that never warmed. He had taken her from the stage 2 days back when the driver slowed at a dry bridge. His gang had ridden out from the cottonwoods and spilled the coach into the sand with 5 gunshots and a laugh that still rang in her head. Her name was Lucy. She told herself this in a whisper because it is easy to become nothing when others call you something you are not. Lucy counted her breaths. She tested the rope with small, patient movements so no one would notice. The knots bit deep and would not budge. When she closed her eyes, she saw her mother stringing beans by the window years ago. Sunlight on her hands, and she pretended the smell of smoke here was only supper burning. The trick made her smile, and the smile frightened her because smiles do not often belong in a place like this, and she wanted to keep what little sense she had left. A rider had been trailing them since morning. She had not seen him with her eyes, but she felt him the way one feels the pressure of weather before the wind arrives. Sometimes a glint showed on a far ridge, or a small drift of dust did not settle like it should. Reno had noticed too. By late afternoon, he was sending men up the sides of the wash to scan the horizon while he drank and cursed. Close to sunset, the air went still. Someone muttered that the desert was holding its breath. Lucy drew in one of her own and held it with the land. The gang was restless, snapping at each other, muttering about a tale they liked to tell in saloons, the one of the masked rider who showed up where justice had run dry. They joked until their jokes sounded thin. Reno said masks were for men who feared to be known, and that fear bled easy. His voice said he believed it. His eyes said he did not. A horse stepped into view at the mouth of the wash without hurry, like it belonged to a man who had never known anything but the pace he chose. Light caught on a white coat and turned it to silver. The rider on its back sat tall and quiet, a wide hat, white as bone, a black band over his eyes that turned his face into a question. 2 revolvers rode low on his hips. His shadow reached forward across the sand, as if to greet the fire before he did. Nobody moved for a count of 5. Then all at once, hands went for guns and curses tore holes in the quiet. The rider did not draw. He stopped where the wash narrowed and the fire threw a trembling line across the ground. His voice came level and plain. "Let the woman go." Reno laughed too loud, then too long. "You rode a pretty horse into a hard place," he said. "I think we will take the horse and the guns and your pride and sell them all in town." The rider did not answer. The silence worked on the men like sand in a wound. Lucy did not know why, but she believed him the moment she heard him speak. The belief startled her, then steadied her the way cool water can shock and soothe in the same instant. She sat a little straighter. Reno saw the change and scowled. The first outlaw fired without orders, a quick bright streak into the dusk. The white horse did not flinch. The rider moved his head a fraction as the bullet tore dust behind him. His hand went to iron and came back with a shot that clipped the shooter's hat into the fire. The man yelped and stumbled, and now the whole wash exploded into noise. Lucy used the chaos to pull at her ropes again. Nothing gave. Grit stung her eyes. Another shot cracked, and a bottle burst near the flames, the liquor flashing hot for a breath before it sank into the sand. The rider's horse surged forward 2 steps, then stopped as if at an invisible mark. The masked man fired again, then once more, each shot clean and measured, not wild. Men dove for cover. Reno pulled Lucy up by the arm, set his own pistol to her temple, and shouted that the next bullet would go through her if the rider took one more step. It is a strange thing how quiet can settle in the middle of noise. The fire popped, and off in the rocks, a cricket tried to begin its song again. Lucy heard her own breath and counted it without meaning to. The rider had not moved. His horse blew once, then stood as if carved from the same cliff that threw long shadow over the wash. "You let her go," the man said, "and nobody dies tonight. Or you hold her, and I start with you." Reno's laugh came again, smaller now. "Who are you to set the law by yourself?" the rider answered without pride. "A man who will not ride past this." He tilted his head a fraction and fired. The shot struck a can near Reno's shoulder, sprayed hot ash onto his sleeve. He swore and flinched, and in that slice of time, Lucy wrenched her shoulder and dropped to the sand. The bullet Reno meant for the sky went into the dirt. The rider's next shot took the pistol clean from Reno's hand. Everything moved at once. Two outlaws charged and went down with their guns kicked away. Another tried to grab the white horse by the bridle and got a hoof for his trouble that put him on his back staring at stars not yet risen. Reno lunged for Lucy and found himself looking down the long dark of a barrel, aimed straight at his throat. "Enough," the rider said. Men froze because the words sounded final in a way that did not invite argument. Reno lifted his hands, fingers twitching. "Tie your own," the rider told him, and tossed a coil of rope that landed at Reno's boots like a snake that had just remembered it could bite. Reno stared, then bent. His men watched him wrap his wrists shame-heavy in the small movements. The masked man nodded once. "Now her," he said, and one of the outlaws cut Lucy's bonds with a shaking hand. When the rope fell away, sensation returned to her arms like a swarm of pins. She bit back the cry and stood slow, because pride and pain cannot share the same breath. The rider was close enough now that she could see the cut of his jaw, where stubble shadowed it, and the line of his mouth when he set it against what mattered. The black mask made his eyes deeper, not hidden, and for a beat she felt seen in a way that had nothing to do with being watched. "Are you hurt?" he asked, voice quiet again, now that the fire in the wash had gone to coals. "Only in the places that will heal," she said, surprised to hear how steady she sounded. "Good," he said. "Can you walk?" She nodded. He turned to the men. "Leave the guns, leave the horses, leave the rest of your hunger in the sand. You will walk to the nearest post and confess what you did on paper a judge can read. If you do not, I will find you again." Nobody laughed this time. He handed Lucy a canteen, and the world shrank to the taste of water and the way it moved down a throat gone dry. Her hands shook, and she pretended they did not. He watched without comment, which helped more than talking might have. When she gave the canteen back, their fingers touched. The contact was small, and it filled the whole space between them for an instant. "What do they call you?" she asked before she could stop herself. He looked past her to where the last edge of sun burned on a far ridge. "Some call me a name that does not matter," he said, and the corner of his mouth shifted as if the ghost of a smile had considered appearing. "Thank you," she said, because there was not another word that fit. He glanced toward the white horse, toward the open desert, where the sky was already turning to a bowl of deepening blue. "We ride," he said. "The night is not kind to the unready." She took a breath that felt like the first one of her life and stepped toward him. The chain she had worn inside her for 2 days lay back in the sand. The mask on his face remained. She wondered what lived behind it, what stories, what wounds, what shape of a man was there, when a legend was not looking. The wondering grew warm and dangerous in her chest. They moved out of the wash, the horse silver bright under the first stars. The masked rider ahead, Lucy beside him. The rescued and the rescuer held together by silence and something neither could name. Behind them the fire died. Ahead of them the desert opened into night and the long question that would not let her go. She loved that he had come. She feared that he would leave. And somewhere inside the fear a new thought flickered, small and stubborn. Could a mask be lifted by anything but a bullet? Could a heart like his be reached by anything but duty? The coyote sang again. The wind shifted. The first cool of night touched her skin. They rode on. The desert does not forgive, but it sometimes grants reprieve. After the fire in the wash died and the outlaws were left to their shame, Lucy walked beside the rider and his white horse into the cooling night. Her wrists still burned from the rope, and each step was a reminder of hours spent bound. Yet her chest felt lighter than it had in days. Freedom tasted strange, sharp, almost frightening. They moved in silence for a time. The rider kept his gaze ahead, scanning the horizon, his posture straight as an iron post. Silver, the great horse, carried itself with a grace that made Lucy stare. The animal's coat glowed under the rising moon, so bright it seemed lit from within. The rider's hand rested now and again on the horse's neck, a gesture that was both command and comfort. Finally, Lucy found her voice. "Why did you follow them?" she asked, careful not to sound too raw. The man answered after a long pause. "Because leaving you with them was something I could not do." She swallowed, studying the black mask that cut his face in half. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said simply. The words should have closed the matter, but they opened a dozen new questions in her. What did he see in her? Was she only another soul in need, or did he notice something beyond her chains? She bit the inside of her cheek, choosing silence over foolishness. They reached a shallow arroyo where the wind whistled through mesquite branches. There he stopped, unsaddled Silver, and built a small fire with practiced efficiency. Lucy lowered herself onto a flat rock, exhaustion dragging at her bones. The fire's glow painted the mask a dull copper, making his eyes darker still. "Eat," he said, passing her a strip of dried meat and a canteen. She took them with trembling hands. They shared the quiet meal without ceremony. Lucy chewed, slow, aware of every sound, the crackle of the fire, the horse cropping sparse grass, the distant cry of an owl. When the food was gone, she dared to look at him directly. "You're the Lone Ranger, aren't you?" she asked. The words came out half challenge, half plea. He looked at her for a long moment, then back into the flames. "That's what some call me." "And what do you call yourself?" He didn't answer. The silence stretched until Lucy almost regretted asking. At last he spoke, voice low. "Names carry weight, sometimes more than a man can bear. The mask, it lets the deed matter more than the man." Lucy felt a pang. "But you are a man, not just a mask. Doesn't it ever get lonely?" His gaze flicked to hers. For an instant she thought she saw something crack in his eyes. Weariness, sorrow, maybe even longing. But then he looked away again, and the mask was solid once more. "Lonely is better than forgotten," he said. Lucy folded her arms around herself, shivering despite the fire. She thought of the last 2 days, of how easily the gang had taken her, how easily the town might never have known her fate. She thought of her father's absence, her mother's grave, the empty room she had left behind, and she thought of this man who had ridden into her nightmare and broken it apart with iron and fire. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't believe that." He looked at her again, steady this time. "Believe what?" "That lonely is better. I think being seen even once is worth more than 100 nights hidden." The fire popped. Silver snorted softly. The rider's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Lucy drew her shawl tighter, watching him in the flickering glow. She wanted to reach across the fire to touch his hand to prove he was flesh and not some dream conjured by desert fever. But she held still, afraid that any movement might shatter what fragile bond was forming. Eventually he rose, checked his rifle, and scanned the dark horizon. "Rest," he said. "I'll keep watch." Lucy lay on the sand near the fire, pulling her shawl around her shoulders. Exhaustion pulled her down fast, but just before sleep took her, she heard him hum something low and tuneless, a sound too human for a legend. It was then she realized she wanted not only his rescue, but his truth. She wanted to see the face behind the mask. Dawn spread pale across the desert, the kind of light that makes the land look both endless and empty. Lucy stirred from uneasy dreams to find the fire burned down to ash, and the rider still awake, standing at the edge of camp, with his rifle slung across his chest. Silver grazed quietly nearby ears, twitching at each whisper of wind. "You didn't sleep," she said softly, sitting up and brushing sand from her dress. The man shook his head. "Sleep can wait. Safety can't." Lucy studied him, his broad back, the way the mask cut across his face like a permanent scar. She wanted to ask again why he wore it, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she rose and joined him at the ridge. The desert stretched before them, ripples of gold and brown, distant cliffs catching the new sun. "They won't give up," she murmured. "I know," he replied, Men like Reno Jax don't forget being shamed. He'll gather what's left of his gang and come hunting. For me, she asked. His gaze stayed on the horizon. For me, you're only the excuse. The words landed heavy but also strange. If they hunted him, then staying near him meant danger. Yet she felt safer beside him than she ever had in her own town. Miles away in a dry canyon, Reno Jax nursed his wounded pride. His hand was bruised where the bullet had knocked the pistol free, his men sullen and restless. Caleb, the youngest, spat into the sand. We can't just crawl back. Every saloon from here to Red Mesa will laugh us out the door. Reno's eyes burned. Then we make them forget. We take the girl back and string up the ranger. Masks can't hide a corpse. Grumbles rose, half fear, half hunger for revenge. By sundown, they had sworn to ride again. Vengeance sharpening them, sharper than thirst. Lucy and the rider reached a narrow canyon by midday, its stone walls streaked with shadows. Silver picked his way careful over loose rock. The rider paused often, scanning high ridges, his silence heavier than words. Lucy broke it at last. What will you do when they come? The same as before, he said. Stand between them and the innocent. And what if you fall? He looked at her, then straight, and for a moment she saw past the mask. Not his full face, not yet, but the raw weight in his eyes. Then I hope the town remembers someone tried. The answer chilled her more than the desert night. She touched his arm without thinking, her fingers light on leather. Don't speak like that. I couldn't bear it. He blinked, caught off guard, then turned his gaze away. Careful, miss. Legends aren't meant for hearts. I'm not in love with a legend, she said, surprising herself with her own boldness. I'm trying to see the man. The air between them tightened, charged until Silver's sudden snort broke it. The rider swung up into the saddle, voice brisk. We move. The canyon's too easy to trap. Lucy climbed up behind him, her hands gripping his waist. The warmth of him, the steady rhythm of the horse beneath them, it all made her pulse race with things she didn't dare name. That night they camped by a trickle of water hidden under cottonwoods. Lucy washed her face, feeling human again, while the rider tended the fire. When she returned, he offered her a tin cup of coffee. Thank you, she whispered. His voice was low, almost gentle. You've been strong. Lucy looked at him across the fire. The mask hid half his face, but it couldn't hide the man entirely. She saw kindness in the way he watched her, caution in the way he held himself apart. Her heart ached with a question she was too afraid to ask. Would he ever take the mask off for her? Far off, Reno's gang rode under the same stars, their torches bobbing like fiery ghosts. Revenge pushed them faster. By the time the moon rose high, they had picked up the faint tracks of Silver's hooves in the sand. The hunt had begun again. The night in the cottonwoods felt almost gentle at first. The stream whispered low. The fire cracked soft, and Lucy let herself believe for a moment that the desert's cruelty had passed them by. She sat close to the flame shawl drawn around her shoulders, watching the Lone Ranger as he cleaned his revolver. The glow lit the edges of his mask, carved shadows deep along his jaw. She wanted to ask him everything. Why he chose the mask. What sorrow lived behind his silence. Whether the man and the legend were the same, or if one had swallowed the other. But each time she opened her mouth, the words felt too fragile. Instead, she said, "You never rest." He glanced up. Rest is when men like Reno strike. Lucy hugged her knees. Always looking over your shoulder, always alone. For a moment, he said nothing. Only tightened the cylinder and set the gun aside. Then softer, he admitted, sometimes the silence weighs more than the fight. The words surprised her. They weren't the lines of a legend. They were the cracks of a man. She leaned closer, heart beating fast. You don't have to carry it alone. Not all of it. Before he could answer, Silver stamped and tossed his head. The ranger's hand shot to his rifle. Lucy froze, listening. Then she heard it too. The faint snap of branches, the shuffle of boots in the brush. The gang had found them. Gunfire ripped the night open. Sparks flew from a rock near the fire. Lucy cried out as the ranger pushed her down, rolling her behind a fallen log. Stay low, he ordered, voice sharp but calm. Bullets thudded into bark dust, stung her eyes. He fired back, each shot precise, echoing through the trees. Reno's voice barked orders in the dark. Pin him down, grab the girl. Lucy's breath came fast, panic clawing at her. She saw shadows closing in the gleam of steel. Her fingers brushed a loose rock and she hurled it with all her strength. It struck one outlaw's hand, making him curse and drop his pistol. The ranger glanced back at her, surprise flashing in his eyes. Good, he said. Then he rose just enough to fire again, dropping another man into the dirt. But the numbers pressed hard. A shot grazed his arm, jerking him sideways. He bit down a groan, but Lucy saw the blood darken his sleeve. You're hurt, she gasped. Nothing I can't bear, he said through clenched teeth. But when he reloaded, his hand trembled faintly. For the first time, Lucy saw not the invincible mask, but a man bleeding mortal vulnerable. The sight twisted something inside her. She crawled closer, pressing her shawl against his arm. You can't fight them all alone. His eyes met hers, fierce and burning. Then I'll fight until I can't. Because if they take you again, there's nothing left of this mask worth keeping. Her heart clenched. He wasn't just shielding her with iron. He was bearing something raw, something real. Before she could answer, Silver charged from the tree's hooves, crashing, scattering the outlaws. The ranger seized Lucy's hand, pulling her to her feet. Mount up, he barked. They swung onto the horse together, Lucy clinging to him as Silver leapt into the night. Bullets whined past, but the stallion carried them, swift, powerful, until the gunfire faded behind. Lucy buried her face against the ranger's back, feeling his blood warm through the cloth, her tears mingling with dust. The mask still hid his face, but she had seen the truth tonight. The legend was a man breakable, and that made him more than a story. As Silver thundered across the desert, Lucy held him tighter, her heart whispering a vow. If he won't let the mask fall, then I will be the one who learns to see through it. They rode hard until Silver's flanks were slick with sweat and Lucy's arms ached from clinging. Only when the moon lifted high did the Lone Ranger slow guiding the stallion toward a dark cleft in the rocks. The entrance to a shallow cave yawned cool and black, hidden by scrub and shadow. Inside, the air was damp with stone. Silver snorted, pawing the ground, then settled near the mouth as if to guard them. The ranger dismounted stiffly, his left arm clutched close. In the firelight of the small blaze he built, Lucy saw how the blood had soaked through his sleeve. Sit, she ordered, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. He hesitated as though he'd rather collapse standing than obey. Then he lowered himself onto a flat rock, silent. Lucy tore strips from the hem of her dress, dipped them in water from the canteen, and pressed them against the wound. He flinched, sharp breath hissing through his teeth. You call this nothing, she said, eyes flashing. I've had worse, he answered, though his face tightened. That doesn't make it less, she murmured, binding the cloth tight. Her fingers brushed his skin warm and real beneath the mask and leather. She tried not to notice how solid he felt, how close. When she finished, she sat back, her heart racing. Why do you hide behind that mask? The words slipped out before she could stop them. The ranger's gaze met hers, steady and unreadable. Because the mask is bigger than me. It carries what men need to believe justice, hope, something untouchable. Lucy shook her head. But I don't need untouchable. I need to know the man who bled for me. The man who keeps standing between me and death. Doesn't he deserve to be seen? The fire cracked between them. For a moment his shoulders slumped, the weight of years pressing down. If you saw me, if you knew everything I've lost, you might not want the man at all. Only the mask. She leaned forward, voice trembling but fierce. You're wrong. It isn't the mask I'm holding on to. It's you. I see more through it than you think. His hand twitched as if he almost reached for her. Then he pulled back, curling it into a fist. Careful, Lucy. This road leads to sorrow. Maybe, she said, lifting her chin, but it also leads to truth, and I'd rather walk it than live blind. The silence thickened, heavy with things unsaid. Outside, wind swept across the desert, rattling brush. Inside, firelight danced across the mask, across her face, drawing them together and holding them apart all at once. Lucy touched his bandaged arm gently. You're not alone anymore, not unless you choose to be. He looked at her long and hard eyes, shadowed and bright all at once. She thought for a heartbeat he might reach up, pull the mask free. Her breath caught her hands, trembling. But then he turned his face away, the mask still in place. Rest, he said quietly. We ride at dawn. Lucy lay down near the fire, her heart aching with the nearness of him and the wall he refused to lower. She closed her eyes, whispering a vow to herself. I will not stop until I know the man behind the mask. Not because I want to steal his secret, but because I already love what little he lets me see. And in the shadows, the ranger sat unmoving, the mask catching the glow, guarding not just his face, but the last fragile pieces of his heart. Dawn broke hard and red, the kind of light that warns of blood to come. Lucy woke to the smell of ash and the sound of leather creaking as the Lone Ranger saddled Silver. His bandaged arm was stiff, but his movements were sure practiced. "We ride to Dry Creek," he said. "It's the nearest town. There you'll be safe." Lucy rose, brushing sand from her dress. "Safe," she asked, "or left behind?" He paused, his back to her. "Reno's men won't stop until they've broken me. If you're near, you'll pay the price. And if I go back to a town that hides behind shutters, that whispers and turns its face away," she pressed. "Is that safety?" He didn't answer, only tightened the cinch and swung into the saddle. She climbed up behind him, her arms around his waist, and felt the tension wound through his body. By midday, the sun hammered the earth flat. Dry Creek shimmered on the horizon, a scatter of wooden roofs and a crooked church steeple. People moved wary in the streets, eyes following the masked rider as Silver clattered down Main Street. Whispers rose like dust, some fearful, some awed. Lucy felt their stares cut across her like knives. She straightened her back, refusing to bow. Beside her, the ranger's presence was a shield stronger than walls. At the livery, he dismounted, his voice low. "Stay close. We won't linger." They walked toward the mercantile, the crowd parting, uncertain whether to fear or revere. Then the shout came. "There he is, the ranger." Reno Jacks and his gang burst from behind the saloon guns, glinting eyes wild with hunger for revenge. Townsfolk scattered screams filling the street. Reno's voice boomed. "Mask or no mask? Today we take your head." The ranger pushed Lucy behind a water trough, drawing his revolver in one clean motion. Shots rang out. Wood splintered, dust exploded. Silver reared hooves, striking sparks. Lucy clutched the trough, heart pounding. Through the chaos, she saw the ranger move precise, fearless, even with blood still seeping through his sleeve. But the numbers pressed heavy, and for every outlaw that fell back, another rushed in. Reno strode forward, sneer-wide. "You can't win forever, Ranger. This town will see you're nothing but a man in a mask." The ranger's jaw clenched. His voice rang clear above the gunfire. "Then let them see." He stepped into the open, tearing the mask from his face. Gasps rippled through the street. The townsfolk saw not a myth, not a shadow, but a man. His face weathered, scarred eyes fierce, yet deeply human. Lucy's breath caught. For the first time, she saw him whole, not just the legend. Her chest ached with the sudden rush of love and fear. The town froze, even Reno faltering for a beat. The ranger raised his gun, voice thunder. "This ends now. You want blood, take mine. But she walks free, and this town will no longer bow to men like you." Something shifted in the watching crowd. A blacksmith lifted his hammer. A farmer raised his rifle. One by one, townsfolk stepped from doorways, faces set. Reno snarled, "Fools, he can't save you all." But the ranger's stance had lit a spark. He was no longer just a masked myth. He was proof that a man could stand and others could follow. Lucy stepped to his side, her hand brushing his unmasked arm. Her voice rang trembling but loud. "He isn't just a mask. He's the man who bled for me, who fought for justice. And if he falls, we fall with him." The outlaws hesitated, shaken by the fire in her words, and the sight of the town rising. Reno raised his pistol, fury blazing. The showdown had come. The street of Dry Creek was a crucible. The air, thick with dust, gun smoke, and fear, sharpened into courage. Townsfolk lined the porches, rifles in uncertain hands, eyes fixed on the two figures at the heart of it all. Reno Jack stood with his scarred grin, pistol-leveled hate burning in his eyes. Across from him, the Lone Ranger mask cast aside, stood tall, blood on his sleeve, Lucy at his side. Reno spat into the dirt. "So this is the legend, just a man with scars and a borrowed face. Once I put you down, no one will remember the mask, only your corpse." The ranger's voice carried steady through the silence. "They'll remember the choice. You ruled by fear. I stood by justice. That's the difference." Reno sneered, cocking his pistol. "Justice don't stop bullets." The ranger's hand hovered near his revolver. Lucy's breath caught her fingers, brushing his arm, steadying him as much as herself. The town held its breath. The world seemed to narrow to the space between two men. The church bell creaked once in the wind. Then two shots cracked almost as one. Dust leapt, the echo rolled. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then Reno staggered, shock wide in his eyes, the sneer frozen, half-formed. His pistol slipped from his hand, clattering on the boards, and he collapsed into the dirt. The ranger stood firm, revolver, smoking, chest heaving. The silence broke. Townsfolk cheered, some wept. Men who had once bowed to fear now raised their rifles high. Reno's gang scattered their will, shattered with their leader's fall. Lucy rushed forward, clutching the ranger's arm, her eyes shining with relief and awe. "You did it," she whispered. He shook his head, voice low. "We did. The town stood. Without that, I'd be nothing." The people gathered, voices rising. The ranger, he saved us. But Lucy only saw the man, not the legend. His face, uncovered at last, carried both sorrow and strength. Scars etched the lines of his past, but his eyes held the promise of something more than duty. When the crowd thinned, she turned to him, her hands trembling on his. "You gave them justice, but you gave me more. You gave me hope. Please, don't hide from me again." For the first time, his guarded eyes softened. He reached up, thumb brushing her cheek, and allowed himself the words he had buried too long. "You saw the man? Not the mask. No one's ever done that." She smiled through her tears. "Then let me be the first and the last." He bent, their lips meeting in a kiss that was not desperate but certain, sealed in the golden light of the falling sun. The townsfolk looked on, murmuring blessings, but in that moment the world was only the two of them, bound not by chains or legend, but by choice. Silver neighed, pawing the earth, ready for the next horizon. The ranger pulled back his hand, lingering on Lucy's cheek. "The fight's never done," he said. "Then let me ride with you," she answered. "Mask or no mask, I'll follow." He studied her, then nodded once, a rare smile breaking across his face. Together they mounted Silver, the town watching as the white stallion carried them toward the blazing horizon. Behind them lay fear broken, ahead of them stretched the endless west. And between them at last, no mask, only the fragile, fearless beginning of love.